It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace.
All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about living off grid, because the big question I think most people have about it all is can you really do it? Like, is it a fantasy, or is it's something that could be reality? And I got to say, it's not easy. I think like early on before the whole prepper world, people would think of like Swiss Family Robinson and things like that. Some of you younger guys don't even know what that is. But you'd have that fantasy of, oh, could I just live? You know? And
Mhm.
and and can you get by without the government and without everything? And living off grid isn't necessarily without the government, but obviously the more government gets intrusive, I feel like we want to go shelter in place and not go out anymore. The
Mhm.
more you don't go out, the more you don't see people. And the more you don't see people, the more safe you feel. How about that?
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I personally am not a big fan of going out.
Now, everybody, I think, has a different interpretation of what off grid really is. I mean, I think the fantasy for me is no people, right? I
Yeah.
don't I don't mind being connected to a power grid if that means I have a way to pay for it and I still don't have to deal with people. Now,
Mhm.
I am not trying to make an argument that that's off grid. I mean, I think by very definition, not being connected to a grid, right, would
Right.
be, off grid. So obviously that is the goal. Don't let it confuse you and then I'm trying to scare you away from the fantasy. I'm just saying that basically getting away is the biggest thing for me in my heart is getting away from society and everything. Now, being sustainable as preppers, when you control everything, I think that's the biggest benefit, because if you're in control, you can make sure that things don't go wrong, right? Like if I know where my electricity comes from because it's the solar panels on my roof, then I have greater control than the power company and all the trees and everything in between, beyond my property that I have no control over, right?
Right.
So that's I think that the beauty of it is kind of control. And just being able to handle and deal with things, when it's beyond your ability. But how do we do that? I guess that's what we really go into. So, in a perfect world, we provide our own water, we provide our own food, we have a way to pay our taxes, right? Presuming there are any. We can pay that mortgage, or if there is no mortgage, even better. How do we do it? How do we make all that happen? Hopefully, we're going to lay out some plans, talk to you about some of the pitfalls that come up, and, is it even possible? Uh, I am still connected to the grid, but I also I would say I call it more like homesteading, right? Where I am, right?
Mhm.
I have some of the benefits of regular life, yet I also try and provide and be as self-sufficient on my property as I possibly can. I think that's the version that I go with. And like I said, solar is pretty cool and could be a great thing. And the more you can provide different things, getting your own water, that's a big thing. And then producing your own food is obviously kind of the goal. I think that's why a lot of people turn to it for the most part, is
Mhm.
they want to have food that they're in control of that's actually what they believe to be healthy. And I would think that's true. I mean, I want my food to be chemical free, right? To not be made in a laboratory and actually, made by nature, made by God, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think most of the people that I see that are actually living the off-grid homestead lifestyle are like, real hippies with, the
Mm,
dreadlocks and the
yeah.
the whole 9 yards, But you don't have to be a hippie weirdo to be into that sort of thing.
Can you still shower and live off grid, Kevin?
I mean, yes, you can, but I mean, do you really want to? That's the question with these hippies I see. It's like we don't use much water because we don't bathe. So
Mm,
that's the trick. A lot of these guys are getting water from their from catch basins and things like
yeah,
that, rainfall. And I've seen some really elaborate, interesting setups that people have done with that. But also I've seen a lot of people that say they just go to the truck stop and use the showers there. And
really?
I don't know how often how often you can actually do that, but
Yeah.
they
That's unusual to me. Yeah,
yeah, they were telling me, or they were saying that they get set up, and they didn't have access to water. They had to, literally carry water from a source, and they said that's great for cooking, washing your hands, and things like that. But it's not it's not shower water.
I
It's not
I
not enough
think
to
right.
you
I
know.
think for me, one of the biggest things of living off grid is you need to have access to water,
Hmm.
and that's essential. And I don't see another scenario. To me, you're kind of playing games otherwise. Even if you're
Hmm.
bringing it in big containers,
Yeah.
I mean, if you can just afford the, "Hey, auto delivery, just bring a big, container of unlimited water for me," that's, I guess, works. But you need to have a water plan. So, to me, the only way uh, there's different ways to make it work. I haven't found the fantasy, make a giant podcast or a YouTube channel that just sustains everything, right?
Hmm.
That I see people do it, and I know there are people out there who are doing it. I know my wife follows a few that are pretty cool that, do sustain everything with having something like that. Maybe you're the travel writer, right? You always see
Hmm.
those. That used to be the thing back in the day. I'm a travel blogger and I sustain my whole income from it. Well, but it doesn't have to be too extravagant. I think it comes down to, can you purchase the property that you want to live off grid on? Can you buy it outright? Yeah, I think if you own the land, you have a real good shot. And there are places you can buy 5 acres for 30 grand.
Hmm.
It's possible. You can have self sustaining with food on an acre if you really know what you're doing. Um, do you have the privacy that you want if you only have a acre? I don't know. Um, there's different things that you could do, but you need to decide what works. To me, 5 acres is kind of more the dream, but an acre is doable. Uh, but I think owning it is going to be your key, and I think you need to find something with water, and that may be drilling a well. That may be, you can have these wells that you put in with the spike and it's easy. One of the big things, if it's not ridiculously deep, you can do a solar well and they're not expensive. You can be pumping water out with solar, whole setup, pump, panels, everything for under $500.
Hmm.
But you have to dig a hole and you have to have water in that hole, right? And that has to be there. So
Right,
that's
right. And
not part of the 500, right?
there's some places where you can have, the water table is 10, 15 feet, below the
Yes.
ground. Also, there are some places where it's 500 feet you have to go down,
Yes.
and it's not going to be as easy to get that water up out of the ground.
And so water is the key. If you do have a stream or river, one thing you might want to look into if you haven't figured it all out yet is a ram pump. Ram pumps are amazing. Um, you can really get some elevation out of the water, bring the stream up 50 feet from where it was and things like that, as long as you have actual running water. I think hand pumps are cool if you can do it, but it can be a lot of work. Um, but you need to decide because it turns out growing food requires a lot of water. So that's something to be aware of. Uh, I guess first let's jump into where where are your best places? I know I kind of did this like hybrid off off grid lifestyle where I wanted to get away and make the change, but I also, still needed to work. I guess that's the answer. I was chose to still have a job outside of the property. And
Hmm.
with that, um North Carolina ended up being a great choice for me. Had lower taxes. I think low taxes are a big part of being sustainable. If
Right.
you're paying 8,000 a year in property taxes, that's another big expense on your off-grid income, which you might
Right.
have in California or New
Right. I
York or
mean, you
something like that,
have your
right?
property paid off and you're still paying a mortgage basically to pay those taxes.
That's a big thing, whereas if you're somewhere where it's $200 a year for your property, that's another story. So, um, Tennessee is really good, Alaska, Wyoming, Iowa. You can also look outside the country. I know, like, Belize is one of the big ones that's hot right now that people get excited about, but there are a lot of countries that you can go and kinda live off grid, and it's okay, and the environment is good for it.
Right. Right. And a lot of these countries that are lower lower cost of living
Uh-huh.
um might work out, but also on the other end of it, it's a lot more dangerous in some of these places. Uruguay is a great place if you want to have, low cost and you have some sort of an income already coming in, whether it's Social Security or retirement or a pension or something like that. And you could live there relatively inexpensively and take care of your own homestead with small amount of cost. But you know, you might want to be wary of people that are planning on breaking in and
Right.
taking whatever you have.
And you might not be able to own guns in a lot of these places.
Right.
Something to think about. But again, maybe that's not your only go to, right?
Hmm.
Maybe you don't care. Maybe you can have bow and arrow. Maybe you don't. I don't know. It depends. You need to figure out what works and also what's important to you, right? What really matters is your goals. So there are lots of good places. Like I said, I'm pretty happy in North Carolina. Alaska sounds great, but it also sounds like it can be tough. You got the huge bear predator thing going on.
Hmm. I mean,
You
there's a
got the
lot of
icy
cold
earth
weather you
going
really got to
on.
deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in
So
upstate New York, and I'll tell you right now, we've got a good 3 or 4 months here where you can freeze to death if you're not, if you're not continually heating your home.
right. Oh, absolutely. And the next thing I think when you think about when you do find this perfect property that you can afford or now another thought I've been kicking around too is communal living isn't the end of the world either. People think of the hippie thing and well, I'm not a socialist, I'm not going to do that and whatever. But you could also go with a bunch of friends where you maybe set up one well and you can kind of work on security together, and I'm talking about from predators and things like that.
Hmm.
But you could also say, hey, you have 3 acres here, I have 3 acres here, and we cut up this 9 acres we can afford together, and we can share some of our big projects because
Hmm.
manpower is a big thing.
Yeah, I see a lot of people doing this, and that's why you see these families that have 8 kids, running the farms because it takes that manpower. You know,
Yeah,
um, you got your 6 and 7 year olds doing the basic basic chores, and then you've got your 15, 16 year olds helping out with the actual work. And I think a lot of these homesteads, a lot of these off-grid living situations require more than just husband and wife situations. Takes more manpower than that to even to build a building. You need a couple of sets of hands.
yeah. And I think that's a big thing too, is networking with your neighbors and things like that. I watch a show, Homestead Rescue, on Discovery or something, and it's funny because whenever they want to tackle big projects and they go in, immediately it's like, oh, well, we found your neighbor. Well, one, you have this big predator problem. We went and talked to your neighbors. This is what all your neighbors are doing about these predators. And
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, you actually talk to people. And that's
Right.
unusual for me, right? Or the same thing. Hey, your neighbor has this big tractor and he let us borrow it for the day. Or he
Mhm.
came over and decided to help out for the day. There's ways to, utilize other people around you. You don't have to just totally isolate. And that's a big thing. It
Yeah.
can really make a difference.
Yeah, and I see a lot of these, say commune, but I think they like to be called, um, intentional communities, uh,
Intentional
you
community.
know, but where it's multiple people
Do you have a cult
working together.
leader when you
Right,
do
you
it?
have a cult leader, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of mandatory, and, but it's multiple people working the land and working the property to be self-sustaining.
Yeah.
It's not really something you can do by yourself, and unless you're a real like Ted Kaczynski loner out there, living in your shed
I'm
and
not sure that's how we all picture ourselves when we think of off grid. Is I want to be Ted Kaczynski.
well,
Kevin.
I mean, listen, different strokes, I guess.
All right. All right. Um, so you do want to lay out your property in an efficient way. And there are a lot of great books on that. One of the ones I always push is The Self-Sufficient Life. Um, but you want to think about, the different things. Uh, before you, like, because people end up like building up things and then realizing, hey, this doesn't work, and
Right.
then they
Have to
tear it
rip it
back
all
down.
down.
You
Yeah.
want to think about efficiency. You want to
Mhm.
think about how things are going to work. Do you need to be near your livestock so that you can protect it from predators? Things like that. Yet how far away do you want them from the house that, it's not a big pain to go feed them, but you also don't smell the pigs in your bedroom.
Yeah.
That
Last week, my wife was telling me that she looked out the bedroom window and there was a red-tailed hawk, fucking up one of the ducks.
yeah.
And, so she just popped the window open and started throwing things at it and chased it off. But, I mean, if it's across the lawn, she doesn't have that kinda arm, you know? And
Well,
what was on the windowsill that she threw? Well, it was some Christmas presents, but, I mean,
yeah,
it
but they were from you. Did she really appreciate
they
them
were for
anyway?
me, so it
Oh,
was my
oh,
it
okay,
wasn't her stuff. So it's alright.
right.
It was alright. But I mean, it's one of those things that you have to be aware of when you're setting up your property.
Yeah,
You don't wanna set up your garden in the spot that doesn't get any sun for half the day. You don't wanna
yes,
set up your greenhouse in the shade. You wanna be conscientious, and you might have to take down a couple of trees, and you might have to realize, "Oh, this has sun now, but in 2 years, these trees are gonna be tall enough that it's not gonna be getting any sun." And you kinda
yeah,
have to think ahead with that sort of stuff. You don't wanna waste your time building something that's not gonna work long term, you know?
yeah. And you have to think about, am I going to be able to have internet there? Is my whole way of supporting my off grid lifestyle going to be making an awesome survival podcast and then not have internet?
Right.
That's the thing. So Starlink, it's been slow coming, but now all the giant trees I had blocking out my Starlink, I just cut them all down. Or
Mhm.
actually, I had somebody else cut them down. It was even better. But
Yeah.
there were some big scary 60 footers, but so hopefully my internet will be better now and everything will be the dream. But it took a long time to get there. You have to come up with a plan. So how do you make money while you're living off grid, right? Because there are certain things you do have to pay for, some taxes. You maybe get some clothes, maybe you get some animal feed that, to keep things going. It's very, one of the big things with animal feed we'll get into, but there's a balance between predators and, and foraging, right? So you have to find a way to get everything to exist together. So bottom line, a lot of times you need money to run a homestead. So money is going to come from, maybe, like I said, maybe it's a podcast or writing articles or some social media thing that you have a fantasy of making. Maybe you have like a remote job and you can do that. That's awesome. Not everybody can find a way to pull it out. I can't find a way to pull out living the lifestyle I want to live and make money doing that, right? That's not an option for me, but maybe somebody could figure that out. Firewood and timber, right? That's a big thing. Cutting and selling firewood or making logs or sawmill, that kind of thing. That all works, but you're going to need land and a lot to do
Hmm.
that, right? You're not going to
Right.
have an acre homestead and you're going to sell firewood. Maybe you go to other homesteads and you cut firewood or, cut other people's woods and mill their lumber and sell it and whatever. But you're probably not doing it on your own property, but then you're getting very close to having a job, right?
Right.
So but that's okay. Maybe that's the life you want to live, right? You want to be the tree guy who goes around and handles things, and you can live like that. That's cool. You can also grow things, right? Vegetables, crops, hay, eggs, honey, ginseng, nut trees, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
There's a lot of money to be made from nut trees. Honey really works. Honey's expensive, but you got to put some effort into selling it, or you got to establish something. Same thing, people do syrup, that kind of stuff. I know people up in New York, you have the right property, Vermont, New York, whatever, Massachusetts, you can collect enough syrup and do all that to basically live off of in like the 3 months and do that. But you need the right property first, or you got to
Right.
have somebody who's down for you going and tapping all their trees. And
Hmm.
that's a lot of work for those 3 months or whatever while you do it. But people do it. And I do know of people who make like 60 grand pulling syrup out of their trees. That's kind of cool. But you got to find a way to do it, right? You got to find something that works for you. Um, Boarding animals. That's one of the things people do. Turning over livestock, but that's hard, and you can breed it, you can sell it. If you're good at butchering and doing that, you can get organized and sell pigs and rabbits and chickens and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I used to say that, raising chickens for your own eggs, it's a great way to save money, but, you're not going to make money selling eggs. Maybe
Unless
not
they're
the case anymore.
$40, yeah, these days,
Yeah,
yeah,
might not be the case anymore. I know, bird flu is a big scary thing that's going on everywhere, and we had some issues locally around this area, and so we've been watching out lately, keeping our eyes open, and there's a lot of wild birds that will, come in, show up, and try and eat the duck food. And some of those wild birds actually will be spreading that avian flu. You can
yeah,
keep all your stuff as isolated as possible, and you're still running the risk of losing all your chickens. And once one gets it, that's it, man. That's everybody.
yeah. No, it definitely, disease and that kind of stuff. And then again, that goes back to the kind of free range, or do you have to buy feed, right?
Right.
So, one of the big things I've always been insisting on my chickens kind of being free range and doing that kind of thing. And we would like feed them in the morning and feed them at night a little bit. They'd be out clearing ticks on the property, and the fantasy is great. We'd randomly have issues with a fox or whatever come and take a couple out. But then it just has progressively gotten worse. Obviously, this is where I am. It's not the same for everybody. The hawks and everybody just come by and eat my chickens, and that's not sustainable, right? I can't lose two chickens a day and keep that
Right.
thing going. So yeah, it's cool that I get free feed. Yeah, it's cool that they're out eating ticks. It's cool that the chickens are healthier and better because they're all free range, but it doesn't always work.
Hmm.
And that's
Right.
the thing. So you have to find a way to do it. It's funny. I talked to a farmer when I was a kid about cattle, and I was like, so if I don't want to actually like grow fields of hay, I just want to have my cattle free range, and I want to be able to sell cattle and make enough money, to keep it going. How big of a, property do I need? And they're all like, yeah, about 1,000 acres. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen for me.
Exactly, exactly. And it takes a lot of land to do free range, for more than just, a few chickens or something like that. If you
Right.
have goats,
Chickens,
if
no
you
problem.
have
But
cows, you need a lot of property. And,
they they
it's
eat goats
not
to
it's
feed.
not crazy to have neighbors that are willing to let your goats, roam on their land.
Right.
It's completely reasonable. A lot of people say, "Great, I don't have to mow my lawn as often anymore." All
Right.
those overgrown bushes in the back. Now it's not an issue.
The big thing is solar farms like to have the goats come over and hang out, and
Yeah,
they just eat right around. And
yeah. I had a friend that actually had an issue with that. He they asked him if he wanted to use the goats for to go around like overpasses and stuff by the thruway.
okay,
All along the structures around the roads, and he got all his goats off of milking, and
okay.
then they said, "Nah, never mind." And
Oh,
so he ended up having to sell all his goats because he got screwed over. But I mean,
guess the deal fell through, huh?
the deal fell
Yeah,
through, right? So now he was just out of luck. Now he's not making milk or making income.
yeah. Now that's a big thing. I think another thing is to be able to look and assess your property and take time to, hey, what's working for me and what's not? Am I spending half my day getting water, or or irrigating my water, right? Is that where my big time sucker is? Or assess what's going on your property, and then start to think of ways that you can change it. And there's nothing wrong with, well, one, start researching, go on the internet, read some books and see. But sometimes you got to you got to actually take action and try, and trial and error, and see what works and what doesn't work for you. But you got to look around and see, how you can make it work. Because like, I watch, people struggle with water, and I see them spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars trying to come up with a solution. And I'm like, it was nothing for me to set up the solar and set up a solar pump. And it's just, you have to figure out the right thing that's going to work. There are other ideas out there.
Hmm.
There's things with predators. Eventually you need to give up fighting predators, and hey, maybe they need to be less free range. I watched one on that, back to that homestead rescue show. These people were insistent on their pigs being free range, but when the mom pig was getting pregnant, and the babies, the boars were basically trying to, they would smash into the pregnant mom, and try and get her to abort so she'd go back into heat, and that kind of stuff. You have to, different things that just, you have to accept reality. And I think
Right.
that's a hard thing. It's hard to mesh reality with the fantasy, and I think that's something that you need to be willing to do, in order to truly, like, have a productive life. I mean, I think that comes up in life in general, where we need to be able to see what we want and what really is, and find a way to make those two worlds work together.
Right.
That sound reasonable?
Yeah. And as much as people like the idea of living off grid, um, there's a lot you can do even when you're living on grid, to limit your situation.
Uh-huh.
Collecting your rainwater, uh, setting up solar panels so that you can have some electricity without relying
Right.
entirely. Maybe you still have your electricity hooked up, but you're not relying entirely on the power company. You have a
Excellent
big
plan.
windstorm, and maybe you're the only one that still has electricity because of the solar panels.
Right.
Maybe maybe you've got a generator that you only run for a couple hours a day to charge up your computer and your cell phones, and then turn it off again. You know, but a lot of the things that we deal with, a lot of the things that come up, you don't even think about. You know, getting rid of your waste. You don't have a lot of trash if you're harvesting all your own food and all you know, your own meat and cheese and
Right.
milk, but you
We
still have
compost
some.
everything, right?
Right. You can't compost. Yeah, you can't compost everything. You have to buy
Right.
some
Yeah,
things.
you're not wrong.
And and I'm a lunatic. I burn all my paper trash because I'm a crazy person. I don't
You
want
are
people
crazy.
getting my old mail. Anything that's got my name or address on it, it's burnt. I
Yeah.
compost all my extra stuff. I make a trip to the dump, so I'm in control of my garbage all the time. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
put it out on the street. But at
The
the same
FBI
time,
is not going through your trash, Kevin?
not my trash, but at the same time, I still have trash. I still have things that are plastic. It's not going to compost. It's not going to. You can burn plastic. I know.
Kevin,
I know.
sin,
But I
sin,
don't. I try not to do that as much as possible.
right.
My kid's a little hippie, and so he yells at me if I do. But
That's good. They always come back and haunt you, you know?
uh-huh. But when it comes to food, there's a lot of other ways to get food, aside of growing it, aside of just getting it from the grocery store. A lot of people are really talented, really good at foraging.
Uh-huh.
I I'm not great at that. You know what I mean? I can't always spot the right mushrooms. I don't trust myself enough to be like, oh, this is definitely a edible one. And then, what? Then you
Ooh,
have diarrhea until you die. I don't. But I mean, there's a lot of people that are, and it's a skill. It's something that you learn.
right.
Um, and a lot of people do, obviously livestock and chickens. And, another great thing is if you have water on your property, you can be fishing. Um, but there's a lot of ways that you can get your food that isn't just growing, your vegetables.
Yeah.
And, you need to look at multiple options. Great, great. You eat spinach for 3 meals a day. That's great, but it gets old real fast. Um,
Kevin. It
I
turns
like my
out if you're
spinach.
just straight vegetarian, your teeth can fall out. That's the rumor I heard.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. I mean, it's really expensive to be a vegan.
Yeah. You got to find a way to make it work. But that's the
Hmm.
thing is just there are ways to do it, but kind of know what you're getting into, right? That's
Hmm.
the whole thing, and it's all about finding balance and going in with your eyes kind of wide open, right?
Hmm.
I think the biggest takeaway is to learn to use people who are doing it, right? To talk to people. And it's not just the internet. And I watched videos and I saw go talk to people who are really doing it.
Hmm.
And also people who are doing it where you're doing it or people who are actually living the life that you want to live. Say you have the fantasy of, well, we're going to have the free range animals all in the house and everything. Go
Hmm.
visit those people.
Right.
Go check it out and see what happens. We have to find a way to work in the world that you want to be in, and I think that's the answer. But I don't know. Just thought we'd kind of get into it because people always have that fantasy and the idea of it, and it's definitely possible. But you need to put yourself in the best position to get into it, right?
Right.
And it turns out it is a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it's
And
more
you're
work than a 40-hour
constantly
job.
going, yeah. It's not, oh, well, I can quit my job because my job sucks. But
Hmm.
yeah, if it's just because you don't like work, might not be the answer
Yeah,
for
it
you,
might not be the way to go.
you know? Now, hermit in the little house with nothing, that might work for you. But
Mhm.
the other way, where you're providing everything, if you just want to eat tuna fish, that's maybe a way to go. But I don't know. Anyway, that's what I got. I appreciate you guys sticking around, checking us out. Um, anyway, show ideas, thoughts, concerns, things you want to hear about, things you want to tell Kevin. Email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, I would say stay safe and we will talk to you guys next week.